What is going on, Trash Talkers? We're back with another episode for you. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the winners and losers from all three rounds of the NFL Draft. All that and much more coming your way right now! Hey, Trash Talkers, it's Mike here. Over 93% of you who view our show each and every day are not subscribed to the channel. If you could hit that red subscribe button, it would help us out tremendously, and it is completely free for you guys. If you want to stay up to date with our daily content, then click that bell icon and you will be notified every time we go live. Nick and I both really appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and we can't wait to keep making more daily content for you. All right, Nick. Well, we were highly anticipating the 2021 NFL draft, and it came and it went. It just poof, it was gone. We had a
Mhm.
great time. We live casted the first round on Colorcast. We watched the second and third round together, and then Saturday day three just kind of went by the wayside, and it just seemed like the fastest time to watch rounds 4 through 7. But either way, we have winners and we have losers when it comes to the draft. And why don't you start us off with the winners?
Absolutely. To me, there are no bigger winner from this draft than the Baltimore Ravens. When you take a look at the big names that they got in this draft, you start the first round with Rashad Bateman and Jason Owe, or as I should refer to him as Odafe Owe, his first name instead of his middle name. Odafe Owe, the big Penn State linebacker who ran a sub 4.40, which is unbelievable. Then they got the big guard, Ben Cleveland, who was all over Twitter. If you saw him, he looks like Hafthor Bjornsson, the mountain from Game of Thrones. He is that big. Tylan Wallace, another big wide receiver that kept on falling. So they got guys like this. And arguably the possible biggest steal of the draft, Shaun Wade, a cornerback who last year was projected in the first round, decided to go back to school one more year, finish out his degree, and ended up having the worst season of his career, completely tanking his draft stock, and he ends up falling all the way to the middle of the fifth round. And the Baltimore Ravens get a guy who could either be a solid CB1 or a guy at worst could fall back and be a safety for him. So I think that the Baltimore Ravens really got a ton of talent and a ton of steals in this draft.
Yeah, my biggest issue with Baltimore, while I do think that they belong in the winner's circle, the only thing holding me back from declaring them the overall winner is that they did not address the tackle position. I thought they really needed to come into this draft and replace the massive hole that was left by trading away their right tackle in Orlando Brown Jr. And at this point, there is no clear and obvious choice for who that's going to be. And I think that they missed a big opportunity. You could talk about getting Odafe Owe or Rashad Bateman. Those are great picks. But instead of Ben Cleveland, maybe go get a right tackle because there was still plenty on the board by the time that they were selecting. So I think that they had some missed opportunities here. One team that I think overarchingly won this draft was the Carolina Panthers. And I just take a look at the players that they drafted. J.C. Horn, Terrace Marshall Jr., who is by far and away my favorite wide receiver in this draft. Uh, Tommy Tremble, the tight end out of Notre Dame, Chuba Hubbard, Davion Nixon in the fifth round, Deontay Brown, the massive offensive guard coming out of Alabama, and a bunch of other players. They filled so many needs. And the biggest one being J.C. Horn is now going to be their cornerback one. He's going to come into Carolina and work with A.J. Boye and a couple of other players that they've had there. He is going to learn from the best, but also be their number one guy. They took him with the eighth pick because he has pro blood in him. His father, Joe Horn, was an incredible star with the New Orleans Saints, and now with the division rival Carolina Panthers, his son will take over as their top cornerback. Terrace Marshall Jr., in my eyes, 6'4, 4'4", 40. This guy has hands like no other. And the only issue that he had in college was that his offensive coordinator at LSU tried to fit him into the same hole that Justin Jefferson filled. Well, that's not the type of wide receiver he is. And that's why you saw his numbers dip a little bit. The fact is that Terrace Marshall is a clear cut number one receiver who can go up and get 50-50 balls. He can absolutely take the top off the defense. He can run underneath routes, but he's not going to be the guy that's coming way across the field to take some of those deep routes away from safeties and corners. That's just not his game. He's great on stop and go routes. He's got quick feet, and I love what he can bring to this team. With the additions of Sam Darnold and some of the other guys that they got this offseason, I think the Carolina Panthers are the overarching winners here.
Well, hey, you can say a team like the Panthers, who have so many holes, are an easy team to pick to be a winner. But what about a team that had virtually no holes? And is there a chance that one of them won the draft? Oh, yeah, the Cleveland Browns. They had a spectacular draft. Utterly ridiculous how some of these guys fell into their laps. They get Greg Newsome the second in the first round to add to an already stellar DB group. Then you add Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the second best linebacker in the draft, in the second round, more than halfway down the second round, and they get JOK, absolute steal. Then they get arguably the fastest wide receiver in the draft in Anthony Schwartz, who has the best track speed by any wide receiver. And then in the fourth round, they get Tommy Togiai, one of the biggest defensive tackles, an absolute mauler in the trenches, a guy that's really going to help replace Sheldon Richardson. They got a ton of talent for a team that really doesn't have many holes. They filled their holes and then some. And this is unbelievable what the Cleveland Browns have been able to do. They are on their way to going to a Super Bowl fast.
Yeah, I love what the Cleveland Browns did. And honestly, short of getting a defensive end, I think that they had the absolute perfect draft. The issue was that they didn't have holes. And honestly, I would have picked them as my winner. I know Greg Newsome is a stellar talent. I just don't think that they needed to go cornerback with their first round pick. I'm not knocking the player. I'm not knocking the pick. I'm just thinking if you're in the first round, you have to go with your overarching need. I thought JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, would have been their first round pick. They get him in the second round anyway, so they can wipe sweat off their brows for that. But I believe that first round pick could have gone towards somebody else that would have worked in their favor. Either way, Cleveland Browns, incredible job. I want to talk about another team that kind of fits exactly where we are, the New England Patriots. What the New England Patriots did with this draft cannot go unnoticed. I mean, if you take a look at where the Patriots were just before the draft and where they are now, you take a look at, and they have the quarterback for the future in Mac Jones. They moved up in the second round to take the best defensive tackle in this draft in Christian Barmore. They get one of the speediest and most athletic defensive ends in this draft, Ronnie Perkins. Ramondre Moore, one of the biggest, baddest goal line backs that this draft had to offer. Ramondre Stevenson falls to New England in the fourth round. Then they get Cameron Mcgrone, the linebacker from Michigan, who will now complete the Michigan linebacker trifecta with Josh Uche and Chase Winovich in New England. You add Joshua Bledsoe, the safety from Missouri, and then Trey Nixon and William Sherman on the back end of this draft. I believe that the New England Patriots came in with an absolute plan to fill out this front seven on the defensive side of the ball, get a quarterback for the future, and they did everything they set out to do.
They absolutely did, and they got some steals in Christian Barmore and Ronnie Perkins. Christian Barmore, a guy that should have been a surefire day one guy, falls to them on day two, and they are like, hey, we're not waiting. We're going to get our guy. We want this guy. We know what he's all about. Nick Saban and Bill Belichick are as tight as it gets, and you know that Christian Barmore is going to be legit in the NFL. Ronnie Perkins has a ton of upside, a guy that slid down a couple draft boards, and he is definitely going to be a project that Bill Belichick will love to work with. The final team on our winners list, the New York Giants, and I have to tip my hat to Dave Gettleman. I never was a fan of the guy, but what he did was pretty spectacular, and he gets some respect from me from that. For him to never have traded down prior to this draft, to doing it twice in the same draft, and doing what and getting what he got is unbelievable. Trading down in the first round when we thought he should have gone with Kwity Paye or one of the big, big wide receivers, he decides, hey, we'll move down, we'll acquire not only future draft picks in this current draft class, but also in next year's, including a first rounder next year. So now they are set for the future as well. And they go and draft Kadarius Toney, a guy that they could have gotten potentially at 11, even though it would have been a stretch. I wouldn't have put it past them. So they get their guy, and then in the second round, Azeez Ojulari, a guy that should have been a first round guy, probably the second best defensive end in the draft. He is really going to work well in the system alongside Leonard Williams. He is going to be huge for them in this upcoming season. And although that's really the extent of the big names on their list, it's the fact that they were able to trade down, grab more assets for future drafts, and also acquire some of the best talent available in this draft class at the same time. It's something that's extremely hard to do, but something that Dave Gettleman was somehow able to pull off. I have to tip my cap to him.
Yeah, I take a look at Dave Gettleman, and I mean, I questioned him in the first round because Kadarius Toney was a repetition. He was a redundancy to what they already did in free agency. So it was a big question mark to me why Kadarius Toney was being added to a wide receiver group that had Darius Slayton, you have Sterling Shepard, you added Kenny Galladay, you got John Ross from the Cincinnati Bengals, and now you add Kadarius Toney. Your wide receiving core is 5 wide receivers deep. On top of the fact that you have Saquon Barkley and Evan Ingram, all of these guys cannot play at the same time together. So you're just hammering home how many weapons this team has. Listen, Daniel Jones has 0 excuses. And the fact that they were able to fix up this offensive line in free agency, then they go out and get Kadarius Toney. He has every weapon he could ever want. Azeez Ojulari, on the other hand, comes in very nicely. He's going to play more of a DN type of role than just an outside linebacker, but what he can do on the edge, especially next to Leonard Williams, is going to be absolutely insane. This guy's going to be able to rush the passer and get a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And then Aaron Robinson, you didn't really cover him, but the corner coming out of UCF, absolute baller. He might have played against smaller schools, but what he was able to accomplish in his collegiate career should not go unnoticed. What he was able to do is he played the ball really well. He has really great size, really great speed. His biggest issue is honestly holding that speed all the way down the field. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really know too many corners that are going to follow Tyreek Hill from the 20-yard line all the way to the end zone. So at this point, I think that he was an absolute steal in the third round.
Well, with winners, there are losers. And hey, you want to talk about the Giants possibly, getting some redundancies at positions? I want to start with the Arizona Cardinals as the first loser. They didn't have many draft picks, and the draft picks that they used, they got redundant picks on top of who they already have, starting with Zaven Collins. He is kind of the Isaiah Simmons of this draft class. And when you already have Isaiah Simmons himself, why are you getting a guy who's just like him? Isaiah Simmons now seems to be falling straight into that safety role. Zaven Collins will take over that linebacker role that Isaiah Simmons played last year. So now you have more of a set 11-man roster on defense, but I believe that this doesn't put them any closer to a Super Bowl run. You add Rondale Moore and Marco Wilson, but these guys are just depth pieces. They're not going to be day one starters. They're going to be rotation guys. They're not going to really do much for you this season. And these 2 years for the Arizona Cardinals are going to be very, very pivotal for them if they are going to make this whole thing work. J.J. Watt is on a limited deal. He's getting up there in age. Chandler Jones is almost out. You got some other veterans in there, A.J. Green. These guys are not going to be around, and you are in your championship window now. Why aren't you trying to move up and acquire talent that are going to fill your holes and help you get stronger rather than grabbing redundancies that are only going to help you stay the same?
Yeah, this is the one I don't agree with because I think you can never have enough coverage linebackers that can also rush the passer. Zaven Collins measured in at 6'5" and weighed in at 270 pounds when he was measured in Indianapolis during his medical checks. So he has incredible size, and what he was able to do speed wise, he can keep up with some of the faster tight ends and some of the slower receivers at the linebacker position, and he can play the middle. So if you have two guys like that, I think that you are setting yourself up to be really special in the middle of the field. On top of the fact, just taking a look at Pro Football Focus, Collins had the highest Pro Football Focus career coverage grade of any linebacker in this draft class and beyond. And he continues, what Arizona is trying to do with tall, rangy linebackers that are going to be able to cover tight ends, be able to play a lot of zone coverage and work the middle of that field. They're going to be able to go sideline to sideline and then also be able to come up and help in the run game. I like Zaven Collins a lot. I think he fills a need for them. On top of that fact, I love the Rondale Moore pick. You have DeAndre Hopkins, you got AJ Green. Who knows what's happening with Larry Fitzgerald? Adding Rondale Moore is an absolute speedster on this team. Not only that, he's going to do a lot of the underneath work, and I know you know
Sort of.
this.
Sort
I
of.
I know.
Be-
Hold on, but I know you know this. But he is one of the strongest receivers that we had in this draft class, and what he's going to be able to bring to this offense is not going to be something that defenses want to take a look at.
Right, you can say that, but they also have Christian Kirk as their slot receiver, and then Andy Isabella as their 4. So Rondell Moore at best is their 5. If they bring back
No,
Larry
no.
Fitzgerald, he is their 6.
Andy Isabella did not work out for them.
Andy Isabella has continued to work out for them. He is still a young budding receiver with plenty of potential. Rondell Moore is
taking
falling
over
behind
for Andy
him.
Isabella.
No, Rondell Moore will be behind him on the depth chart. He will see very few reps this upcoming season and for the next couple of years until some of these guys get rotated out via, free agency or retirement. Rondell Moore is not going to crack into the top 3 wide receivers for a very long time, if ever.
I think you'll be surprised to see where Rondale Moore actually lines up with the Arizona Cardinals.
I hope I'm proven wrong, but I don't see a path for him to really be a difference maker for them during their championship window. I really don't see it happening. But there are more losers than just the Arizona Cardinals. They weren't the only bad teams to make bad picks. On top of them is the Indianapolis Colts. They struck gold with Kwity Paye falling to them at 21, but that's where it ends. They didn't address the biggest hole, as you like to say, the Anthony Costanzo-sized hole at left tackle. They didn't draft a single tackle except the 7th round, a guy by the name of Will Fries. If you think that a 7th round tackle is going to replace your blindside blocker, you're ridiculous. That's absolutely not going to happen. So there's a glaring hole still at Carson Wentz's blind side, the guy who struggles the most with bad offensive lines. He is now going to a team that doesn't want to fix up an offensive line when it needs to be fixed. Instead, they're focusing on positions that have plenty of depth at them. They're not fixing the holes that are going to make them a stronger team. If you are a championship team, if you are a team that has playoff potential and you're not filling the holes that are going to help you get to the Super Bowl, then what are you doing? You're wasting your time. That's why your culture is not growing and prospering into a winning culture.
Yeah, I agree with the Colts here. Kwity Paye helped fill the Justin Houston void that he left when he did not re-sign through free agency. Then they doubled down by getting Deo Odeyingbo from Vanderbilt at defensive end and say, okay, all right, they're really stressing rushing the passer. But then their next pick didn't come until the 4th round, and they drafted a tight end when you already have Mo Alley Cox and Jack Doyle on the roster. There's no reason to go with a 3rd tight end. And I agree with you. The Anthony Costanzo sized hole that was left is massive for this team. They still have some cap space available. I wouldn't be surprised to see if they go after a player like Alejandro Villanueva, if they go after somebody that's already a veteran. But at this point, not getting a tackle until the 7th round, not a good look for Indianapolis Colts fans.
Look, after all these drafts were done, every team had made their picks. No team was worse than New Orleans Saints. They had some of the fewest picks out of any teams, and with those picks, they chose beyond poorly. with the first round pick, they chose Payton Turner, a guy that was a day two guy guaranteed. He should have been back into the second round, possibly even third round. And they go and grab him in the first round when they have glaring holes at multiple positions. They address one at defensive end with Payton Turner, but he is not the guy when you have guys like Azeez Ojulari still on the board. Their best picks, Pete Werner and Paulson Adebo, they are average guys. They are guys with potential, but they're really not. They don't have a path to become elite in the NFL. They are guys who are going to be role players. They're going to be okay, but they're not going to be difference makers. Those are guys that you can draft later, possibly even day 3, not guys that you should be getting on day 2. I think they were reaching at every single pick. And then you see them getting Ian Book, the quarterback out of Notre Dame. I don't understand this one when you've already given Taysom Hill a massive contract, even though there's a lot of voidable years, and then you have Jameis Winston back on the roster. Now you're throwing Ian Book into the mix. I don't understand what direction they're trying to go in as far as quarterback goes. So there are so many holes that need to be filled still on this team, and there are a lot of question marks that need to be answered.
Then moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, not really a whole hell of a lot from the Seahawks to talk about. They had 3 draft picks and didn't move up, didn't move back to acquire more assets. They stood pat, and at this point, they took in the second round they took Dwayne Eskridge out of Western Michigan. The only other player to ever come out of Western Michigan was Antonio Brown, so congratulations. They got Trey Brown, the corner from Oklahoma, who I like. I think he was a really good, solid player. And then Stone Forsythe, the tackle out of Florida. Besides his name being really cool, I don't think he was a really. I think he's a. Besides his name being really cool, I think he was a very developmental piece. I don't think he was a player that is going to be able to protect Russell Wilson. He's not one of those guys that you're going to be anchoring your offensive line around. And with the limited resources that they had, the fact that they got Dwayne Eskridge and then went corner right after that scares me because it shows me that they are not committed to protecting Russell Wilson. This man is going to continue running for his life over and over and over again. And at this point, I feel bad for him. I honestly want him out of Seattle.
Well, we have one more team on the losers list, and it's the Green Bay Packers, but this was not my decision. So I want to turn this over to Mike and get his reasoning and rationale as to why they made the losers list, because to me, they're not winners, but they're definitely not losers. So let's hear it.
The biggest issue with the Green Bay Packers not only happened in the draft, but happened during the draft. Aaron Rodgers does not want to be part of this team. In fact, he said, and I quote, "I want Brian Gutekunst fired." He wants the GM of the team fired before he makes any decisions about coming back to this team. That's how fed up he is with this organization, and rightfully so. He wanted weapons, they went defense. He wanted weapons last year, they drafted his replacement. Now, when you take a look at the players that they got, Josh Myers, the center out of Ohio State, great. But in the first round, you took a cornerback, Eric Stokes, who you reached on. He was not a first round pick by any stretch of the imagination. He could have been a late day 2 guy at best, and you take him in the first round to stick it to your quarterback because you don't like the way he's acting in the media. Then Amari Rodgers comes up and you listen, you get him a weapon, finally, somebody who will be able to help him. But you know what? He's not going to be alone. He needs some help as well. And then you went offensive guard, defensive tackle, cornerback. You get a tackle with in the 6th round, and then you go inside linebacker and running back to end the draft. They really took this draft to stick it to Aaron Rodgers and say, you are not going to dictate how we run this draft, how we run our organization. And at this point, they are playing with fire. I think the biggest loss comes because Aaron Rodgers is probably not going to be there, and they have nothing. They did nothing to try to bring him back. Amari Rodgers is not going to be the reason that Aaron Rodgers says, you know what? You're right. Thank you for getting me the weapon that I always wanted, Amari Rodgers out of Clemson. And I don't want this to come across as I hate Amari Rodgers, because I don't. I actually like the guy a lot. I think he's a really good receiver. I think he's a better version of Randall Cobb. But he is not going to be the difference maker that he was looking for in the wide receiving core. He wanted them to go up and get one of the top guys in the first round to help them compete now. You talked about the Arizona Cardinals. The Green Bay Packers championship window is right now. And if they aren't willing to go up and package some of their future assets to go get a Devonta Smith, a Jalen Waddle, a Jamar Chase, a Kyle Pitts, any of these guys that they could have moved up the draft board to get, and instead they're focusing on depth pieces throughout. I mean, they have so many draft picks here that they didn't need. They have 9 draft picks. Why do you need 9 on a championship team? Half of these guys are not going to see the light of day, and the other half may make the roster. I think they absolutely blew draft weekend.
I mean, hey, you definitely made some good points, but I still, at the end of the day, I like Eric Stokes and I like Amari Rodgers. I think those are 2 bright spots on the team, and they had a lot of holes, and they seem to have filled most of those holes. Whether those players will make the team or not, they definitely addressed most, if not all, of their holes. And hey, Julio Jones is on the trade block. Who knows? He may end up going to Green Bay, so we'll have to see and find out. But you never know.
I doubt the Falcons are trading their star wide receiver to the Green Bay Packers just to go watch him win a Super Bowl in the through the NFC.
Julio's going to go win somewhere, so
That's fair. All right, well, that's going to do it for now. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. We go live every single day. That'll be all. Peace and love.